Sometimes when you're reading music you might come across these notes that have dots exactly to the right hand side. This isn't the same as a note that has a dot directly above or below it, and we'll be having a look at these later. These dots to the right hand side of notes change their length. You may remember that so far we've had a look at notes that last for 4 beats, 2 beats, 1 beat, and then smaller fractions of a beat. We use these dots to write down notes of different lengths. The way they work is that whenever we see a dot like this, we take the length of the note that's been dotted and add on half again. So let's have a look at a few examples. Right here we have a dotted quarter note. So here's our normal quarter note. It has a filled in note head and a stem like this, but it also has a dot. So what does this mean? Well, we know that a quarter note lasts for 1 beat. And the effect of the dot is that we add on half again, so half of 1 is a half. So that means that this dotted quarter note lasts for 1.5 beats. By the way, another way that we could write this is a quarter note tied to an eighth note, just like this. Exactly the same thing happens when we look at a half note. Here's the note with its empty note head and a stem. If we add a dot to it, it becomes a dotted half note. So how long does a half note last for? We've already seen this lasts for 2 beats. Half of 2 is of course 1, so we can add these two together, and that means that a dotted half note lasts for 3 beats. Again, another way of writing this would be a half note tied to a quarter note. As you can see, the reason why we use the dots is it's a much neater and simpler notation than always having to write these pairs of notes that are tied together. So that's the reason why a lot of the time we choose to use dotted notes rather than ties. But there are some occasions when we use ties, and we'll have a look at those in due course. And finally, just to complete our set, we have down here at the bottom a dotted whole note. Here it is. It's our egg shape that's not been filled in, and I'm sure you'll remember that this note lasts for 4 beats. And the fact that it's dotted means that we have to add half again, and half of 4 is of course 2. So we add that on, and it gives us a total of 6 beats. And in just the same way, we could write this as a whole note tied to a half note, which would add up to exactly the same number of beats, 6. So now you know what to do whenever you see any type of note. That could be a whole note, a half note, a quarter note, an eighth note, a 16th note that has a dot next to it, a dot that sits exactly to the right hand side. As you can see, it doesn't matter whether the note head is pointing upwards or whether the note head is pointing downwards. In both cases, the dot always sits to the right hand side of the main note head. When we see this dot, it's telling us to add on half of that note's length again. So, as we've seen, a dotted quarter note becomes a note that lasts for 1.5 beats. A dotted half note is a note that lasts for 3 beats. And a dotted whole note is a note that lasts for 6 beats.